In this video, I'm going to talk about how to build your story bank. And keep in mind here that 95% of you fail to achieve this goal. I mean, fail to achieve a story bank. That's good enough, and good enough by your own standards as a candidate, right? So I'm fully aware that I'm starting to sound more and more like a broken record when talking about story banks, but I still believe that it's maybe useful to make this as a tutorial with some tips and tricks and with some guidance as to what types of stories would you need to be focusing on to be successful in your goal. Who needs a story bank first? So I found that pretty much everyone needs a story bank, even if you're on the job, even if you're happy with your job. I believe it's still a good idea to build a story bank, simply because when at some point you will for sure look for a new opportunity internally or externally, and then you'll have to interview. And what happens here is that best candidates I know look at their story bank as a backup or as an insurance. You know, when you have a job interview lined up, you basically also have a deadline to prepare a job interview. So why put pressure on you to prepare for that interview when you can do it before that with the help of a story bank, right? So this is what the most successful people do, and professional speakers do have story banks as well, right? Many other reasons, but let's focus on how do you build a story bank and what types of stories would this require, right? So with respect to what types of stories should you be looking at, probably the most common of them would be your elevator pitch. So everyone does this, but still that's maybe, the most comfortable to go about, and some people are particularly find it particularly relaxing to prepare their elevator pitch, right? But if you want to get a little bit more serious, maybe you'd want to focus also on your successes, right? When thinking about your successes, you might also want to cover a broad behavioral spectrum here, right? Such as, stories around dealing with ambiguity, decision-making, prioritization, learning, invention, a deep dive maybe, and so on if you want, right? So I'm just naming a few here because I like to keep it concise, but there are plenty other lists even online or in my paid content where you have guidance around what specific behaviors are the most common interview questions in today's interviews, right? Then another important topic you'd want to cover in your story bank is your stories around your ability to work with others, or as part of a team if you want, or to interact with others cross-functionally, right? So if you want, for instance, to be fully up to date with today's trends, you'd also want to cover topics such as diversity, equality, and inclusion when building your story bank, okay? Maybe just keep in mind that in today's job interviews, prepping for interviews, pretty much every candidate is saying that I'm a people's person, right? So maybe try to be more specific with these things than that, right? And then what other types of stories? Another big category of stories you'd want to focus on for your story bank are the regrets, right? So failure stories, if you want. You can have 3 of them. You can have more of them. Idea is here, the reason why you build a story, why you include that failure story, is that because you want to focus on the learnings, what you learned from that. So if you learned a lot, then you also might have had a couple of these failures, right? So keep in mind the outcome. Why would you prepare a failure story? Because you want to focus on the learnings. Why you prepare a success story? Well, because it's a behavior. Either it's an ambiguity, either prioritization, maybe it's an interpersonal, right? So the end goal is in mind. This is pretty much it. When it comes to the types of stories you want to prepare, maybe also prepare your weakness. Many people fail to acknowledge what their weakness is. This usually happens because what you tend to do is to take the job description and try to pick something from there and then talk about that. Well, in fact, I believe there are better ways you can go about this as well. But probably the key thing you must keep in mind with building these story banks is it's not a one-off thing. It's not as if you start it today and you finish it by the end of the day, right? It's something where consistency is key, right? So showing up every day to build your story bank, that's one of the key ingredients for success, right? Pretty much, if you want, like my schedule publishing videos on YouTube, unless I do it regularly, it won't be as efficient, right? How many stories should you prepare in your story bank? Well, I found this people, the least I've seen I could connect with interview success was 15, but I've seen as many as 60. This probably varies wildly on factors such as your experience and your comfort level writing these stories. And some people, make a larger stories. They split it into 5 smaller ones. So it's very much up to you how you build the number of stories. But this brings me to the 2 major issues you'd want to keep in mind here that prevent people ending up with your story banks. It's the quantity. They don't have enough stories, right? You basically get discouraged, right? So the consistency effect at its best here, and you don't end up with enough stories. A quick fix on this, if you cannot find enough stories, would be to zoom in or zoom out of your greatest success if you want, and I'm sure you'll be able to highlight on multiple behaviors, right? And then if you are able to highlight one on ambiguity and one on gut-wrenching prioritization, then you're going to get 2 stories there, right? So it's possible, so long you invest a little bit of time there, to have enough stories, right? And the other problem, as you'd expect, is you have poor quality stories, right? And when I say poor quality stories, there are 2 main issues here. Either they are not specific enough, and ChatGPT cannot give you specific stories, by the way, so it's not the best reference to take. So try to be specific with keywords, with names, something that is memorable for your interviewer during that exchange. Second problem is lack of detail. So what people tend to be overconfident with when interviewing is that they will remember all the details of something which happened, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And reality is that many of you will fail a deep dive test here, right? Also, using AI and ChatGPT, overusing these tools will backfire. So it's not a matter of it will backfire. So if you overuse ChatGPT to inspire your stories from, that will not be a successful outcome. So maximum you should do is maybe to reward your answer. So try to have ChatGPT to give some broad examples, role independent. At least that's what I do in my training. I give role independent examples, or I give examples from roles, from a variety of roles, simply because I want to stimulate your ability to reason by analogy, because this is what works, to find your own stories from your own experience, not to clone mine, right? So this will be the thinking around that. And last but not least, this is an experiment of an investment in yourself, a self-development tool, if you want. And the primary advantage of this, as I said in the beginning of the video, is that you basically invest into this once, and it's there for life, right? So long you maintain it. I know plenty of people who maintain their story banks over the years. Okay, so this would be the best way I'd recommend to go about building your own story bank. And again, I could clearly connect the fact that some people build their story banks with successful interview outcomes. Of course, it takes time. It's a challenge, as with most self-development things. But so long you do it and you do it consistently, I've seen some good level of success with people who build story banks. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.